thank you very much for being here in historic Court Square, and I want to thank Secretary Galvin. He's been a good friend to myself and the city of Springfield and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Been very helpful. I know we're going to be speaking about the census, but he's been very, very helpful when it comes to historic tax credit activities and working on projects that we're doing. And if you think back to the tornado 10 years ago, he was all very helpful in bringing funds here for the historic trees that we have. I also, Margaret Boyle's here from Congressman Neal's office. Thank you, Margaret, and the Congressman, Mr. Chairman, he's always there for us, we appreciate it. And of course, my election commissioner, my city clerk, and 311 director, cabinet head Gladys Oyola, who really, and Secretary Galvin and I were just speaking about that, did yeoman work to make sure that everybody was counted here in the city of Springfield. When the secretary called me last week to let me know, he came out here at Rebecca Johnson School months and months ago, sounding the alarm. He's going to speak about it now, sounding the alarm that we really had to work hard to get everybody counted. And any mayor in urban America, he or she, their lifeline is that federal funding or CDBG funding. If Springfield was to fall below 150,000, we'd go into a different category. Not only did we not fall below 150,000, but we increased to 156,000, and that's absolutely fantastic and a testament to Secretary Galvin and to our team that was on the field here locally, led by Gladys Oyola, that we made sure that everybody was counted. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up my friend, our friend, Secretary of the State of Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Bill Galvin.
Well, thank you, Mayor Sarno, and it's great to be with you today. I'm glad to see our trees are doing okay. I am delighted to be here today to congratulate the city of Springfield on the effort it made in the United States Census. As I'm sure all of you know, the census last year was certainly not without controversy. We had national controversies relating to the counting of persons who were not native born. We had issues relating to the timing of the count. The mayor correctly remembered a year ago we were out here because many of the areas, the undercounted areas, still remain uncounted, and the time for the census to be completed was rapidly approaching. We were shortchanged in terms of that timeline in October, so there was a great deal of legitimate concern about an accurate depiction of the census here in Springfield and throughout Massachusetts. For Massachusetts, the census was a great success. For the first time, we went over 7 million people. Our statewide population is 7,029,000. And in fact, it preserved our congressional representation in Washington, which is extremely important to make sure all of our areas are represented. 10 years ago, we lost a seat, and Western Mass paid the penalty for that in losing one of its seats in Congress. This time we did not lose a seat, so we will have our full congressional representation. So in that regard, it was a tremendous success, and it came because of the commitment and dedication of the municipal authorities, as well as not just the public officials, but the community groups. And the legislature too. They gave us the funds that we were able to reach out to community groups, to reach out to people, to make it clear to them how important it was that they be counted, and overcome some of the fear and anxiety about informing the government about their presence here. So it was a great success. But it also revealed, I think, a number of problems. While Springfield went up, and most importantly preserved its status over 150,000, the increase in Springfield was only 1.9%. Statewide, the increase was 7.4%. In fact, Massachusetts was the only state in the Northeast that had that kind of growth. We were the highest growing state in the Northeast. But when you look at the statewide totals, the state growth was almost exclusively in the eastern part of the state. We had indeed some of the older cities, such as Lynn and New Bedford, go up. We had cities like Lawrence go up dramatically as well. So we've seen not an even base of growth throughout the state. We've seen, in fact, a part of growth that was much more concentrated in the east and less so in the west. What does that mean? This depiction here on the map, we've color-coded it. The green are the places that actually had a numerical gain in population. The orange and the yellows are the places that went down. So we had a number of cities in western Massachusetts, Holyoke and Pittsfield and others, that went down. that actually lost population. And we had others that had slight gains in population. The more dramatic losses are depicted in orange. The bottom line is this. This is a call to action. I think what this says, what it confirms, what many of us have long suspected, that the core of economic activity has been in the eastern part of Massachusetts for a very long time. And that's reflected in the growing populations. It's reflected in the fact that people went into some of the older cities that had certainly all of the same problems that older cities in the West had, but still went in and had their families there and using the educational facilities there. Why did they gain and why did not some of these cities in the West gain? I think the answer is lack of economic opportunity. It wasn't about the services that those particular cities offered, contrasted with the services in these cities. It was about jobs. It was about economic opportunity. It was about the opportunity to move forward in life. That's what drew people to those cities. The same must be happening, or must have to happen, over the next 10 years in Western Massachusetts. Western Mass has been shortchanged for a long time. That's not a secret. I'm not giving you breaking news to tell you that this morning. What I am saying is this is a call to action. For the next 10 years, we should be focused on increasing the economic opportunity and activity here in Western Mass. It may not manifest it in the same way, perhaps, that it does in other parts of the state. There are different industries, different circumstances. But the reality is there has to be a concentrated effort from the state, at the state level, to bring about new economic activity here in Western Massachusetts. If that does not happen, we will continue to see the trend of reduction and decline to the point where we will, in fact, all suffer the loss. So I think it's extremely important. It is a call to action. It has it's a multifaceted answer. I mean, part of it's transportation. I know there's been discussion about the east-west rail line, but it's not all that. I would suggest, and my analysis is, it's about economic activity. It's about jobs. We know in the East it's often said that, well, it's the concentration of higher education facilities and healthcare facilities. Well, you have higher education here in Western Massachusetts. Surely you have healthcare facilities here in Western Massachusetts. There needs to be a concentrated effort to make sure that there is an effort to bring business activity into Western Massachusetts. Now, that's not going to be simply a state activity, but I think the state has the primary responsibility. The federal government in this administration has been giving us the tools. For instance, the application of broadband across the states in the United States is certainly going to have a very good effect in the Berkshires. But nevertheless, we still must see a focused objective here of bringing about more economic activity, more jobs to Western Mass. Otherwise, these changes in population that we've seen are going to continue. Within the statistics from the last 10 years, we've seen changes that have occurred, but those changes in terms of ethnicity and other changes, but those changes have occurred throughout the state and throughout the country. So it isn't about who's coming here, it's how many people are coming here and why are they coming here. And the reason they're coming to certain cities and not to others is they don't sense the opportunity for jobs. That's what it's very simple. And I think we need to commit ourselves now to making sure that does not continue over the next 10 years. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come here today. Not just to congratulate Mayor Sarno and his leadership and the community groups and their leadership and the effort that was put in. That was terrific. They did the right thing. But instead of arguing with the facts, which are that the populations went down in these communities, it's accepting them and making a plan for change. So that is why I came here today. I want to kick off this discussion. Now that we have these numbers in, it's kind of like when you're in elementary school getting a report card. You know, the report card told you what you did well at, and it told you what you had to do better at. Well, this is the opportunity. It used to be in the parochial schools that I went to, was the flip side of the card you wanted to read, where they judged you about, did you work well with others, how hard did you concentrate? Well, this is the flip side of the card. And this is the part of the card that we have to focus on, which is getting it right for Western Mass for the next 10 years. You have tremendous natural assets here. All of us in Massachusetts appreciate and enjoy that. You have tremendous people here. You have tremendous community spirit here. Community spirit that, frankly, I don't see every other place in Massachusetts. We need to put that to work. You have the political leadership here, both at the federal and state and local level. We need to put that together. We need to make sure that for the next 10 years, our job one is to get jobs to Western Massachusetts. So I congratulate Mayor Sarno and all of the people who worked hard on the census. We were successful despite great odds, but now it's time to go to work to improve the product for the next 10 years. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Go ahead.
You say the population of the state is just over 7 million. Do you know how much the population is in Western Mass, whatever statistics you got for the 2020 census for this area?
Yes, well, I mean, we're talking about, I can give you, we have, and they're on my official website, all sorts of individual figures for each community. But Hamden, I don't have my glasses with me, but Hamden went up slightly, but most of the other counties did not. Hampshire went up because Hampshire has shown some growth, and you can see that depicted in the map. Places like the Berkshire County went down. It went down over the last 10 years. It's been a continuing trend really for the last 40 years. Similarly, the Franklin County population went down. Hampshire went up, like for instance Amherst went up fairly significantly, some of the other smaller towns did, but the cities declined. And so the issue really is, if you look at the totality of population in Western Massachusetts, it's now a smaller percentage of the state than it was 10 years ago. So when we look, for instance, at congressional representation, then because our state population went up so high, the norm, that is how many people you need for each seat in Congress, went up also. 10 years ago it was 727,000, and for the most part you could sustain more than one seat. It's now 781,000. So the new norm for each congressional district is going to be 781,000. That means the first congressional district has to gain roughly about 50,000 people to keep its current identity. It will happen. That will happen because we do have 9 seats. So it's not about losing a seat, but these adjustments are going to have to be made to reflect the population. And that gets back to your question, which is the population in the West did not increase, it declined to some extent, totally with the 4 counties. And the population in the East increased. So the feed into the population, of the population from the East to the West to preserve the 2 seats here is going to come at the expense of some communities that are currently in Eastern Mass districts that will have to transfer most likely into the 2nd congressional district. At the legislative level, the norm also went up. The new norm is almost 44,000 for each House seat. So when you apply that to the Berkshires, which have a total population of 129,000, obviously that will not sustain 4 seats totally contained by the Berkshires. And we looked at some of the Eastern Mass locations. For instance, the city of Boston gained 58,000 people in raw numbers. That probably means they're going to get another House seat, legislative seat. Well, that if they gain one, somebody has to lose one because it's still 160. We don't know. That'll be up to the legislature to actually draw the lines. But by and large, the West went down, the East went up.
Just to that point, Mr. Secretary, you said that the Boston area had went up. That means the state legislator will lose a seat in Western Massachusetts.
Well, we're not sure exactly where, but if you look at the speaking in generalities, there's fewer people. The norm, that is, the number of people you need for each seat went up to almost 44,000. And I mentioned the Berkshires because you have to start at the end of the state when you start forward. Their new population is 129,000 for the entire Berkshire County. They have, I believe, 4 resident legislators there at the current time. But they already go beyond Berkshire County. They go into Franklin County and some of the other areas. In order to sustain 4 seats based in the Berkshires, they're going to have to gain some people more people from those counties. Similarly, while the city of Springfield went up, it went up 1.9% to the current new number. If it were to sustain all of the seats that it has, it may have to get more population from some of the surrounding communities. Those are decisions for the legislature to make. I don't get to make those. They will make it. But in terms of the generalities of what it tells us from a political representation point of view, that's the reality of it.
Secretary, beyond the representation piece, what could some of the other impacts be on communities and areas that did drop population?
Well, aid to education, anything that's a per capita benefit. So, as the mayor mentioned in his remarks, there are certain programs that they qualify for. I mean, it's not, in the case, for instance, of Holyoke, it's not such a dramatic drop that they're not going to get anything. They're going to get aid. But obviously they're not in a stronger position if they had more people. So these are the numbers. We are dealing with the reality of these numbers. fortunately, at this time, the state is in a good position financially to help communities, whatever the shortfall might be. The major impacts of the census beyond political representation are, in fact, aid to various forms of assistance, most notably education, secondarily transportation, which is extremely important, which would be more of a regional issue, and then lastly, health, public health. So those are the areas. Each community will have some effect of this. Communities that have grown will get more. But I think, as I said, the numbers weren't such a dramatic drop. They're more a gradual, it's been a gradual decline over many, many years. And that's why I say it's really time now to talk about how we're going to reverse this. And the message is clear. There's no mistaking it. As I said, I mentioned some of the cities in the east that gained, cities such as Lynn and New Bedford. They are the same urban type locations as Springfield and Holyoke. They have the same challenges when it comes to multilingual populations. They have the same issues when it comes to public education. So people didn't go there because they wanted simply public education. They went there because there were jobs. And that's why. And so that's why I think the focus to reverse some of these problems is to enhance economic activity in Western Mass. That has to become a focus of attention, in my opinion, if we're going to change this over the next 10 years.
You mentioned economic problems. What are some ways to get more jobs into the western part of the state in the next 10 years?
Well, I think you have to bring industry. You have to talk about, and when I say industry, I'm using a very broad term. Industry may be a number of things. Commercial activity, whether it's hopefully it's new, cleaner type activity, but we've seen, for instance, in some of the areas I was just speaking of in the east, where it's been spin-offs of academic activity or spin-offs of scientific and medical activity that were buildings. East Cambridge is an example, the city of Cambridge. East Cambridge was an industrial area. 30, 40 years ago, there's warehouses and factories. It's now become a mecca for people in the science and technology area, healthcare area, Moderna, for instance, places like that. We have to find what industries are a good fit, and it might require the state to provide financial incentives for that to locate in Western Mass, whether those be transportation incentives, straight out grants, whatever it takes. I mean, the economy in the West has changed over an extended period of time. There was a time 30, 40 years ago, I've been around so long I can actually remember it, when insurance industry was a very significant part of your economy here. It's not, as it was. It's changed too, but there has to be replacements for that, and we have to look credibly at ways that we can enhance the economic activity here. I say build on the colleges. You have a very good number of prestigious universities that are here. You have other facilities. I'm not going to stand there and say, I have the answer, this is what you have to do. I am telling you what the problem is. And I think all of us have got to come together. And as I said earlier, for too long, Western Mass has been shortchanged. I think we owe an obligation to Western Mass to focus on its problems. If this was a different part of the state, if this was Southeastern Mass, I'd be saying the same thing. You need the help. We need to make sure we provide it. That's why I think we have to start the discussion. How can we make it a more attractive places for people and industries to locate that will bring jobs to this area? What do we have to do? I think we have not just the figures that demonstrate the population declines, but we also have a roadmap of where it needs to happen. You know, you could go back 40 years ago in Pittsfield, 50 years ago in Pittsfield, and it was GE, it was heavy industry. That's not coming back. We're not going to fool ourselves about that. But it told you, or it tells us now, that that was the reason why that was an economic hub. You have to find something else to replace it. That needs to be the concentration. It's not enough to say, well, we're going to do what we can. No, make it a priority. Make it a priority. And this isn't a political thing. It's not a Democratic, Republican thing. It's none of that. It's a civic thing. We see a portion of our state that has great potential, that's being underserved economically. We need to do something about it. And that's what these numbers are all about. That's the message.
How confident are you that the count was accurate?
I'm pretty confident. Let me tell you what we did. Because we were so concerned about the accuracy of the counting, especially the shortchanging of the timelines in October, I began a campaign before the census actually closed last year to provide the Census Bureau with direct information from existing public records, such as the numbers of children in schools, such as the responses to the local census, the annual listing reports that each community takes in, other demonstrated business records that demonstrated how many people were living in the places. And we gave all those to the Census Bureau. For instance, in the case of universities where we knew they had sent their students home in the spring of 2020 because of the pandemic, we said we'd take the records of their off-campus addresses and treat them as population numbers, and they did. And I had great help from the congressional delegation in doing that. And we hit the Census Bureau hard. So I think these numbers, which our original estimate was statewide was 6.8, to come in at 7,029,000 suggests to me that the numbers are accurate. When you look at the Western Mass numbers specifically, again, the trends were there. The year-to-year estimate, there's an annual estimate made by the Census Bureau. They reflected these things. So this wasn't shocking. It just confirmed what was there. And these trends have been in existence for some time. You can go by some of the statistics I have showed 70, 80, 90, what happened in each decade. And the trend is there. So that leads me to believe the numbers are accurate. It means we're not going to, as I learned in law school like 45 years ago, you don't fight the facts. And we're not going to fight the facts. We're going to deal with the facts. And we're going to make sure we move on the facts. And that's what we need to do now.
In terms of Springfield staying above the 150,000 threshold.
For the 10 years?
Yep, over the last 10 years. What does that mean specifically for the federal funding if it dropped below? How big of a difference is that?
Well, it's a significant difference. As the mayor already noted, there are a number of programs that you have to be what is known as a moderate-sized city to qualify for. So you wouldn't have qualified, at least not on paper. So it would have been a challenge. So it opens the door for opportunity. I think it also speaks to the housing policy in Springfield. The number of housing units added in Springfield over the last 10 years was a significant contribution to this. And it speaks further to the need to continue those efforts going forward. The exact kinds of housing may change, but I think we have to talk about that too. The mayor mentioned initially historic tax credits. That's something we try to use effectively to keep housing stock up and to build new housing and convert other buildings into housing. So it's a multifaceted policy. But I think Springfield survived this because of those policies and because then there was a very industrious effort at counting. Any other questions? Well, again, thank you very much. I don't know if the mayor, do you have anything you want to add?
I just wanted to thank Secretary Galvin again for coming out here. And he's right to sound the alarm now. You don't want to turn around 9 years from now or 9.5 years from now and say, what happened? You don't want to lose any congressional representation. You don't want to be shortchanged on state reps or state senators. So the trend is there. Go on the facts. We're going to continue to promote and move the city of Springfield forward. But overall, in the western part of the state, it's a good four-letter word, jobs. And if you have jobs, people will come. And that spins off everything else. So he doesn't want anybody shaking their head 10 years from now and hope we turn the trend around, as we've done in Springfield here, going, what happened? What happened? So I think it's a strong message and it's a good message. And again, he's been a good friend to myself and the city of Springfield on a myriad of issues. But and again, to Gladys Oyola and the community, the boots on the ground, we had tremendous effort. Secretary Galvin, when he came out to Rebecca Johnson, was concerned. COVID-19, everything going on. If we don't count everybody, and as you had said with the, you fall for Springfield, a moderate city, middle of the road city, middle population, you fall below that 150, you lose a myriad of funding. And that goes to housing, youth development, job creation, economic development, you name it, nonprofits. So that was key. So I was elated when he called me and said, hey, not only are above the $150, you actually increased, and we want to do that even more. So again, I appreciate the Secretary coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Gladys, for all your work.